Right now, we've got Jim Brunberg on the piano over here. Also, the great musician in his own right, obviously, and the guy behind Mississippi Studios and a lot of great records that get recorded here. And Casey Neal over here on the guitar, and he is obviously the leader of Casey Neal and the Norway Rats, and they're going to be playing tonight too. Both these guys are going to be playing, and so it's going to be a cool night. And we're going to kick it off here by this first thing that Casey and Jim and I put together. It's just a little story about reporting the book and working on the book and getting to meet Bruce. And these guys have set it to music, and so here we go. When I pulled up to the curb in front of him, Bruce Springsteen cocked his head for one of those "Are you the guy?" looks, and when I waved back, he smiled. We shook hands on the sidewalk, and I followed him to the kitchen door at the back of his Aunt Dora's house. Later, after I chatted with Dora and went out for pizza with Bruce, we were back on the sidewalk making plans to meet again the next day. "Now I got to give you the Jersey hug," he said. He threw his arms over my shoulders. I thumped his trapezy eye in turn, and for a moment it was like, how did this happen? Actually, I already knew that. I spent the last 2 years researching and writing a biography that until that day had not included any input from its subject. So in that moment, my brain whirled like a macro processor, determined to take in, analyze, and cross-reference every cellular element of the moment. Not just how he spoke and stood, but also the content and subtext of his words and movements. What was he doing here, really? I needed to interpret everything and anticipate how I could incorporate it into a manuscript that was already 2 weeks overdue. I had a lot to think about, and nearly all of it springing directly from the evening of December 20th, 1978, when I watched Springsteen tear into the opening bars of Badlands in the smoky dark of the Seattle Center Arena. I was a sophomore in high school, 15 years old and chubby, with no real sense of the grown-up world, let alone my place in it. But when that 29-year-old guitarist confronted the microphone with proclamations about trouble in the heartland and the head-on collision happening in his guts, man, I heard something so raw and unrelenting I knew it had to be the truth, and that somewhere down the road he described, I'd find my own future.
All the nights busted open, these 2 lanes will take us anywhere.
When we left Aunt Dora's house, Bruce took me to Federici's Pizza on Freehold's Main Street and introduced me to his buddies at the bar. He took the leftover slice they urged him to have and pointed the way to a back table where tears and shots of tequila quickly appeared. A pizza came next, and when the time came to leave, he snatched the check. "My town, my money," he explained. When I got into my rental car, he checked rush hour traffic on Main Street and instructed me to follow him on the secret back way out of Freehold. When a traffic light separated us, he pulled over, dialed my cell phone, and told me where he was waiting to lead me home. He picked me up at my hotel the next morning and took me to his property in Colts Neck, just a few minutes east of Freehold. We talked without interruption for 4 hours, then went up the road so he could play the songs he had recorded for his new album. When we got to the studio, Springsteen led the way to the control board, where 2 sets of lyrics sat in front of a couple chairs. After apologizing in advance for the volume, "Musicians," he said, "like their music loud." He nodded to the engineer, cueing the tribal drums that herald the start of "We Take Care of Our Own." Next came "Easy Money," then "Shackled and Drawn," then an electrified studio take of "American Land." I listened and read along on the lyric sheet, but mostly I watched Bruce listen to his own work. I saw him nod to the beat and then abruptly stop, cocking his ear and giving a tiny twist to a knob just to make it sound slightly more perfect. So let's think again of that 15-year-old kid back in 1978, Or let's forget him entirely and think about anyone who gets the opportunity to hang with a childhood hero. It's dreamy, crazy dreamy. The beer and pizza, the tequila shots, the endless conversations, the in-studio preview of the not-quite-finished album. For months, Springsteen's friends had said the same thing about what he was like in person. He's pretty much exactly who you think he is, they said. But of course, who we think Bruce Springsteen is springs entirely from Bruce Springsteen's own vision of who he is, or who he wants people to think he is.
So tell me what I see when I look in your eyes. Is that you, baby, or just a brilliant disguise?
Just around the corner from Aunt Dora's house on McLean Street lies an empty lot that once held the house where Springsteen spent his earliest years, living with a manic-depressive father whose illness made consistent employment an impossibility. Bruce's mother worked as a secretary, but the family was poor and mainstream society unsympathetic. Viewed generally as a loser, the teenage Bruce kept to himself until rock and roll sent him reeling. When he picked up a guitar, Bruce was transformed and has spent the rest of his life remembering that magic and forever searching for moments to recreate it in bigger and better ways. And so the lithe young singer took on the muscles and poise of a superhero. He became a global icon, and then something like a national monument. And when he bumped into a friend of mine during his 2008 tour, and the guy requested an extremely obscure 25-year-old outtake, Bruce stopped the next night's concert in its tracks to tell everyone about how he'd met this guy and how he'd asked for a song the band had never even considered performing live. Until that moment, of course, when he dedicated the world premiere of None But the Brave to my buddy. The guy's feet didn't hit the ground for 6 months after that, but when I asked Bruce what the moment had meant to him, he said he didn't even remember it. He couldn't remember any of it. "I do that all the time, man," he said. "That's my job. I make miracles happen." And you know what? It is a job. A labor-centric job. As the next months passed, I saw Springsteen run his band through military-precise rehearsals. I saw him have a temper tantrum aimed at a spotlight operator who wasn't even at work yet, and I saw his face go white when I asked the wrong question at the wrong time. Sometimes I wondered how much of it all was artifice. I recalled his displays of ego and impatience and suspected that maybe I'd learned too much about this guy who had once seemed so heroic to me. Yeah, but then the house lights would go down and I'd be in the audience and see it all happening again. The one-time loser born anew, the lonely teenager finding his feet, the screwed-up guitar player who for all the world is standing, playing, and singing, and being exactly who he and they so desperately needed him to be.
Oh, this train
carries saints and sinners,
this train
carries losers and
oh,
winners,
this train
carries whores and gamblers,
this train
carries lost souls.
oh, this train
Dreams will not be thwarted,
this train
faith will be rewarded.
this train
Hear the steel mills singing,
this train
bells of freedom ringing.
It's Jim Brunberg on the piano and Casey Neal on the guitar. Thanks.